For this video and this lesson that follows, I would like for you to get out your Writer's Reference textbook so that you can have it right in front of you and refer to the pieces in A1 that are necessary for this particular assignment. All right, so I don't want to reread the instructions to you. The instructions are here, but read them carefully. You are going to be writing an analytical essay. This is the draft part. And so you'll see all the resources linked below that you'll need for this. And I'm going to give you some guidance here in this video, and you have guidance in the actual guidelines and in the rubric. But absolutely make sure you understand sections A1 and then A3. A3 helps you with ways to analyze. But A1 has instructions, it has a sample essay and all of that. So be sure to refer to section A1 for this assignment. So the idea about analyzing text is that we need to be open-minded and we need to rely on evidence. We need to vet our evidence even, consider the source. So as college students, this is where you are going to demonstrate your critical thinking. That is literally the title of A1D in your textbook. Demonstrating your critical thinking skills, and that's what you're going to do with this assignment. You know, it's like, how well do you read? How well do you comprehend what you're reading? I mean, are you able to kind of divide how the author is presenting the material? So this is a absolute practice in critical thinking skills. What we don't want to do is go into any text with preconceived opinions about it. For instance, we're going to be reading Dan Rather. Dan Rather is an elderly man at this point, but he spent his entire career as a journalist. He is well respected, but there are people that would view him as being, left leaning or liberal or whatever. And so if you go, if you're not of that belief side or whatever, if that's not your political leaning, and you went into this article thinking to yourself, oh, he's going to be, extreme, whatever, really liberal, I'm not going to pay attention to what he says, then that's a problem. You're going into it with the wrong attitude. He is well respected. This is an excerpt from his book, and I'm not really seeing too much biased language, but that's part of critical reading. You look for biased language in it as well. What your main concern is, though, is looking at the evidence the author provides. And then you can go to that, well, does this evidence make sense? What are the problems with this evidence and the way it's used? So just be careful about how you approach text. You want to preview it as our text says, as our textbook says. You want to preview it and think about who the author is. Think about where the information is coming from. Now, I realize that we are going to get this article from BuzzFeed, but again, it's an excerpt from an actual book, and it is a memoir, Dan Rather's memoir, and this particular section is called On Why America Needs More Empathy. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the text itself, and then I'm going to walk you through some things to think about. I just want to, actually get into the text here. So I just left the text as the website version. I do have other versions of this, but and I apologize for the ads. It's what we do when we don't have, a reader. We have to read stuff on the internet and deal with the ads. Again, we have a little bit of background here. You can go and certainly look up Dan Rather and look at his history. This was written or posted in 2017, and that's about the time the book came out. So this is pre-COVID, but it's very much during, it's after the 2016 election, and, just a lot of, issues in America for sure. So I want you to pay attention to how this is set up. He is going to begin by telling stories about his childhood, and it even includes some pictures so that we have, this background information here about his childhood, and talking about how extremely poor he was, but how there were even poor people living in his neighborhood. And these people took care of each other. They helped neighbors out. They lent a hand where they could, and they took care of them. So he talks a lot about the background. He also mentions that particular really poor family and what was done for them. And then he does share this little interaction with his mom. So the idea about empathy is like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? And so that was what she stressed to him, is that we don't feel sorry for them. We just understand how they feel. We know that this could happen to anyone, and that's like the basis of empathy, that you care for others, and understanding that we are all vulnerable. He has one more like story about someone who, let's see. Well, it says when I visited. Look at this area here. I'm talking about the young man right here. A boy of a few years older than I who lived near us and had a gifted artistic sensibility. He was the kind of kid who could draw almost anything. I remember with wonder how he would build model airplanes out of balsa wood with perfect symmetry and not a wrinkle in the paper skins. But then it says here his family was in dire economic straits, so he quit school at 15 to start looking for a job to support them. It's like this guy had, was born with all these skills, but I mean, life just like served him poorly, right? And then it goes on to say that he became ill, and then shortly thereafter he died. And that this I wish I had a pointer of some sort. Oh, let's do this right here. I attributed it to a broken heart, and I imagined him taking his final breaths with flashes of what could have been, what might have been. And then he says, these stories of the Great Depression were not unique. They were repeated millions of times in neighborhoods all over the country. So he establishes this way that the U.S. was, that citizens of the U.S., and at least in his world, were and treated each other. I usually have a huge problem with the idea of make America great again, or let's praying for the country to get back to how great it was. Well, when you're talking about going back to slavery or going back to civil rights issues or whatever, it was not great. And so I have a problem in pretending like America was great. However, at least in other parts of our country's history, some people treated each other better than they might now, depending on across economic classes and that sort of thing. Anyway, so rather established is this background. And then he proceeds to point out that, it was that kind of community, that kind of togetherness that allowed the U.S. to, win World War II. And then he proceeds to talk about the different legislation and policies that were ultimately put in place based on the concept of empathy, that like our government and the good policies that are established that take care of people. Some people would find issues with some of these things because it's all about capitalism, right? Well, the good policies that take care of people, that help people in need, were established based on a concept of empathy. And so he points out all kinds of different social policies and legislation that were enacted because of that. And then he gets to the crux of his argument right here. I worry that our nation today suffers from a deficit of empathy, and this is especially true of many in positions of national leadership. And then he goes on to talk about the issues that are happening and comparing them to the past. And he talks about, I don't want you to get confused with it, but this last paragraph, he talks about Warren Buffett's ovarian lottery. It's just the idea of like, in these last two paragraphs, being born lucky versus not being born lucky, and just how we all need to consider that like, whatever our position is in life, that was just what we kind of lucked in or not, So he takes that concept and applies it to like, if we could remember how, if we feel like we have a good position in life, that we have what we need, we have enough, boy, how lucky are we, because the next person may not have all the blessings that we do have. So read this article, pick it apart. If you can print it, mark it up, pay attention. I think I have kind of defined these, like it has basically 3 sections to it. It has the background, it has the legislation and policies, and then it gets into the present day and the issues that he's seeing. Okay. So let's just kind of walk through a little bit more on the, I have a few notes here on some slides. So again, A1 is all about active reading, and these were the steps that were outlined in A1. And then your task for the analytical essay is to analyze the text, examine the text to understand what it means and how it makes its meaning, and balance summary and analysis. Do not summarize this article. I'm reading it, and I don't want to reread the article, right? You can pretend that your audience has not read the article, but you just need to provide enough information to make it make sense. Again, I can't stress enough how you should look at the sample essay in A1E, and we'll talk about that in a minute. As you're analyzing the text, absolutely think about the appeals and how they might play into this, and think about that. Is Dan Rather, first of all, does he appeal to ethos with his credibility, with his authority? Does he appeal to logos? Does what he's saying make sense? He's using plenty of like laws and social policies and things that can be looked up, and we can look into that. And also, is he appealing to the reader's emotions? Is he appealing to pathos in this? These are ways that you can think about when you in analyzing this text. So I want you to consider these key points. How does he describe acts of empathy from his childhood? What purpose do the stories from his childhood serve? According to Rather, what helped the U.S. win World War II? What types of legislation and social policies relate to the idea of empathy? How does Rather feel about the current state of empathy in the U.S.? And how does Warren Buffett's concept of the ovarian lottery relate to empathy? Now, I'm not meaning for you to answer these questions in your essay. I just want you to consider all these as you write your essay, as you analyze Dan Rather's article. Here are some tips I want you to consider. First of all, review A1 and the sample essay. It says, Amelia Sanchez writes about Betsy Taylor's article. Imagine this was Amelia's assignment. So pretend, because it doesn't really give us a prompt, I don't think, in A1. Pretend this is Amelia Sanchez's prompt. Read Big Box Stores Are Bad for Main Street by Betsy Taylor and compose an analytical essay in which you respond to the following questions. Taylor suggests that big box stores like Walmart are bad for America. Do you agree with her position? Explain. I mean, it's that simple. And so then Amelia Sanchez reads Betsy Taylor's article, and then she marks it up, and she makes notes in the margins, as you can see in A1. Another tip, use the rubric to guide your writing. Your essay should meet the criteria in the rubric. Number two, once you've introduced Dan Rather as the author, use only his last name going forward, and you can see that in the example. And then the last slide, and I apologize if I'm doing it this way, it's just easier. Be mindful of how to incorporate source material. If you quote Rather, set the quote up properly, you're going to see in your sample essay that Sanchez quotes very little. Like, she just basically does some quote weaving. You want to rely more on summary and paraphrase. But just like Sanchez does, when it's Rather's ideas, make sure that your audience knows. So if you'll look at A1E, if you look at Amelia Sanchez's essay, her first body paragraph starts like this. Taylor's use of colorful language reveals that she has a sentimental view of American society and does not understand economic realities. So it's very clear that she's talking about Taylor here. If you skip down into the middle of the paragraph, she says, Taylor does not consider that many downtown business districts failed long before chain stores moved in. So see what I mean? You incorporate the author when it's their idea. Make sure that it's clear to your audience. So again, I can't stress enough, review the sample essay, pay attention to how Amelia Sanchez works with the source material. And then if you have further questions or concerns, because this is where plagiarism comes in, if you do not incorporate source material well, you could be in danger of plagiarizing. So make sure that you, if you need more guidance on this, MLA3 in your textbook has that information. You'll also see on the second page of A1E, there's a works cited entry, and you need to do that as well for your paper. I do give you the works cited entry. You can just copy and paste it and set it up. Oh, sorry. Get out of here. Okay, so a few more things. Let's talk about PI paragraph structure. Body paragraphs should have really standard structure, a topic sentence, information or details, and then explanation. So I have provided this resource for you. Please read it over. It's not rocket science. It's just really formulaic paragraph writing. I will tell you that the samples that it gives you has it PIE, like it doesn't mix I and E, but you are absolutely allowed to mix I and E. And you can see even the use of I and E in Amelia Sanchez's work, because when we talk about I, we're talking about the material that comes from the source, okay? And then when we talk about E, we're talking about the student explaining or analyzing or interpreting or commenting on the what has been presented. So read over this, read the example PI paragraphs, and set your body paragraphs up in this way. Again, if you'll look at Amelia Sanchez's essay, you'll see that every single one of her topic sentences begins with Taylor, and she sets her body paragraph up that way. If you'll look at the second body paragraph, Taylor's assumption that shopping in small business is always better for the customer also seems driven by nostalgia for an old-fashioned Main Street rather than by the facts. And then that's what she's going to talk about in that paragraph. She's going to keep her paragraph focused on the nostalgia and explain why that's a problem. You do have some guidelines here that I just kind of help you a little bit further. It just goes into more detail about the instructions. And I remind you of PI paragraph structure in this as well. And yeah, just, all essays have at least one introduction, one conclusion, and one body paragraph. You're going to need to use as many body paragraphs as necessary to argue your point. The rubric is here. All right. So walk yourself through this. Give yourself a title. Don't title it on Why America Needs More Empathy. Make the title creative to your essay. And you want to introduce Dan Rather and the title of the article right away. And then set up your thesis. And your thesis could be as simple as Rather makes a compelling argument in regards to empathy in America. Or rather misses the mark. America is not as bad off as he claims. Whatever your position is, that's what the thesis statement is. If you'll look at the sample Sanchez, her thesis is Taylor incorrectly assumes that simply getting rid of big box stores would have a positive effect on America's communities. So she does not agree with Taylor's stance. You can pick either position. Notice that we are in third person point of view, so that even though it's showing Amelia Sanchez's opinion, we don't see the word I in there anywhere. Okay? So follow the rubric. In the draft review, you're going to use the rubric to grade yourself. Okay, so I think that is all I have on this. Read it carefully. Look at your sample. And below here, when I get done with this video, you're going to see reminders of how to set up the paper, and then also how to do a hanging indent for your works cited. Works cited is the last page of the document. I'll see if I can find a sample essay to throw up on here so you can get a feel for that. But it's the last page of the document. So if you get to the end of page 2 and you're done, hit enter until you're on page 3. Center the words work cited in the middle, and then hit enter and do your hanging indent. So I'll add a video about that as well. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.